Welcome to the Software People Stories. I'm Shiv.
I'm Chitra.
And I'm Gayatri.
We bring you interesting, untold stories of people
Associated with the creation
Or consumption of software-based solutions.
You'll hear stories of what worked,
and sometimes what didn't,
you will also hear very personal experiences.
and insights that would trigger your thoughts
And inspire you to do even greater things. In this power-packed conversation with Jaya Vaidhyanathan, who's a CEO for BCT DIgital, you will listen to her journey about making decisions and creating support systems around her. And not only from a personal standpoint, she also talks about how she creates that environment that will create high performance in her entrepreneurial journey as well. And she shares some of the key things, mantras of her life around discipline, focus, and hard work, and her inspiring role models in her life.
So the more you chip at the stone, the sculpture emerges. And it's a concentrated effort of a few. And you should never think it's my journey or my vision or it's just me. Because a bunch of people take it together and you're traveling on the road together. And the road is bound to be challenging because it's not a guaranteed success. But it's a combined effort of a few, the team that you're building. And there are going to be challenges. And you are going to kind of innovate continuously.
Listen on.
Hi, Jaya. Welcome to the Software People Stories.
Hi, Gayatri. Pleasure to be here.
So happy to talk to you after such a long time, Jaya. For our listeners, could you share your introduction in your own words? That will be great.
I'm Jaya Vaidhyanathan, entrepreneur, founder and CEO of BCT DIgital. It's a risk management and compliance software company. And we focus on disruptive technologies such as artificial intelligence, predictive analytics, and look at, I would say, changing India in a large way, because that was the genesis of thought process behind setting up the company. Having worked predominantly outside India, majorly with US, UK, South Africa, etc., and having worked with large global companies and corporates such as Accenture, Standard Chartered Bank, where we met, I think it is more about what you give back to India. And one of the things that was a genesis was to look at how do we focus on doing something fundamental for the economy of India, which was we were by and large importing a lot of products from the West and trying to adapt them to India. And I often give the example of the Ford car, which first came to India, and there was a lot of adaptation on how you do it. Compare and contrast that with the Tata Nanos of the world. So I think it was more about looking at India from an Indian perspective and seeing how we give back to the economy. That was the thought process behind the setup of the company, and glad to know that we are now in 20 plus countries and doing really well. So that was a quick snapshot. I know in India, especially for the younger viewers, they would love to hear of a little bit of the academic background as well. So undergrad in computer engineering, MBA from Cornell, and did a CFA as well. So that's a quick snapshot of my journey.
Awesome, Jaya. Awesome. So I have so many questions that are lined up. So let's get started with the first one, right? I know you are coming from the MBA finance background, but your career has been largely in the technology space. Of course, impacting financial, but the technology space. How did that arch start? I mean, how did that initial, arch get started?
I think if you look at it, that's a very common arc with most people. I can pick a number of corporates where investment bankers have taken on and then led technology companies. I'll probably explain that with an example. If you look at Cadence Design Systems, it's a premier tech company. And it's led by Libutan, who comes from an investment banking background. Yes, he is from MIT and things like that. But, it's more, I think when you have a financial kind of bent of things, you understand how businesses work. And so you have an inside out view of the business, which I think helps. But I've always never been away from technology. Starting from undergrad in computer engineering, investment banking was focused on technology, telecom, energy type of companies. And it was also bringing large deals to India through HCL and Accenture. So I think it was always never away from technology, but I think coming from a finance background, you understand how the outside world works, and then you can bridge the gap between technology and business.
Very cool, Jaya. In fact, you're saying marry the why of it, staying for it, and then go to the what works and everything, right? So and taking that, and then now you're almost a prolific speaker in the speakers network, and you speak in various forums around, and not just from a finance angle, but what works in India, be it Forbes or be it so many forums. How do you equip yourself? It's a learning curve, right? Being a tech lead, being working at the services product sector, and being able to face so many different people, right? It means building your profile up in terms of not just from a understanding, but also
I think I should credit in part a lot to my mom, because she put me on stage before I was 1 year old. And surprisingly, I could speak in 3 languages by the time I turned 1. So I think it was part of my DNA. I love to enjoy talking. And, my team actually jokes that if I didn't become an entrepreneur or a technologist or a banker, I probably would have made a good talk show host. So I think speaking is something I like, because I like connecting with people. And once you connect, articulation automatically happens. Because you want to express what you're doing, and you want to say how it has an impact either in business or in terms of the technology, and why you use the technology you do to make an impact. And that partly also answers your earlier question, because technology is a tool, because it does something to achieve an objective. So that is the gap that you bridge. But all of them are oriented towards achieving something, making a difference, doing something different. And technology is a tool you have in hand. So I think rest just follows. I just love connecting with people. I love talking and articulating. And I think that genesis was sown probably in my very, very, very young age.
In fact, that I should also tell all our listeners that you didn't even ask me what questions I'm going to ask. It's completely impromptu, right? I think that just the level of confidence that, okay, I can handle, that also is sort of builds on you, right? More and more you're able to do it. I think it's sort of lesser that holds you back. Jay, you from HCL to Accenture to Standard Chartered and now Bhavan. What propelled you each time you moved? It was for a larger and more impactful one. Any decisions that you had to take? How did you take these decisions? I know change is hard, right? But how did you make that happen for yourself?
I love change. That's probably what it is.
Wow.
And like we tell our kids, right, try everything once, but don't make it a habit. So I think it's more about getting out of your comfort zone and doing something, because I think that's when you learn the most. If you're very comfortable doing your job on a day-to-day basis, that means you're not trying hard enough. So unless you're learning, you're not living, is a philosophy I live by. Even today, whether it's a new sport, I'm learning boxing now. So it's always something I want to learn something, explore something new. So I think that could be part of the softer side of things. But it was always an articulated measure. It was a calculated risk, because it was always about learning something I didn't know. I came from, as you know, from an investment banking career, and I knew the business side of things. I knew the world of deals. But I was working on technology and telecom companies. So what propelled me to join HCL was the fact that I could probably make a difference in terms of bringing large deals to India in terms of the technology space. So I think the understanding of technology gets deeper, understanding of big deals, the way India works, and what is from a services perspective, did quite a lot of work with Accenture. Then, as you know, moved back to banking because it was from a different perspective, from a vendor to a bank. And having done all of that, it was more an amalgamation of different learnings. You worked in banking, you worked in technology, you worked on the services side. And I did want to kind of be part of the product revolution of India, because I think true innovation happens when you move from a services to a product mindset. Because I did want my contribution to India in terms of innovation space and true innovation. In a bank, you do components of innovation that's needed for a bank, but a large scale innovation mindset on what are you doing different, how is it going to have an impact, that was something that I wanted to experience. And that was the genesis of my entrepreneurial journey. And like you said, I could have picked different areas. Like I did start from a social media product, interestingly, which was to get a pulse of what are corporates thinking today. But then I quickly decided that, hey, I know financial services the best of all different domains. And I know technology as well pretty well. How do you marry that and do something to fill a gap that exists in our economy? So before we started on different things, we started with a survey of what ails banks in India. And then that survey, as you know, is published, which was more to talk about the NPA conundrum, how NPAs in India were on a rise, and what are some of the things that we should be doing, and what are learnings from the West, learnings from financial services, your experience as a banker, to say what are gaps in our current system that is going to give rise to NPAs. So, and then look at what is the gap in the white space in the spectrum of global companies. Why are they not focusing on such an important segment? Why? Because in India, it's a bigger problem than most other countries, NPAs. And NPAs, as you know, happen because of two reasons. One is willingness to pay and the ability to pay. The ability to pay is universal, but the willingness to pay is very special. And I think that comes with the chemistry of figuring out how do you bridge gaps when people are saying, I'm not willing to pay, I have the money, right? How do you make that from a gut feel to a science and prevent that from happening? So preventive approach rather than a forensic approach. So these were some of the gaps that I wanted to look at. And when you do something, do it big, right? Because in terms of impact, whatever you do, go big or go home, right? So it's more about dream. If you dream, dream big. So I think it was more about, how much can you return to the economy? So pick some large pain areas of our economy, NPA being one of that. Why? Let me give an example. So if you look at a bank in India, let's say asset size of 50 billion, which there are quite a few banks, and average NPA is 10%, which means 5 billion is at risk. Even if you reduced it by 1%, you would be returning 500 million back to the Indian economy per bank per year. Just think of the impact. So I think it was more about go big or go home. And if you want to create an impact, make that with the bank. And that was the genesis of the first product in terms of what you know best, how do you articulate, and whatever you know best, how do you make an impact, and how do you kind of give that back to the country that you came from and which you were, product of that. So I think that was the genesis. So a long answer to your question, but I wanted to give some examples to drive home the point.
Excellent, Jaya. So I have been a woman entrepreneur for a long time as part of my consulting firm. When I used to meet other entrepreneurs, there is always this question of, there is hesitation, lack of understanding. There's a voice club out there. Did you face any of that, and how did you maneuver that part?
I think from an entrepreneurial mindset, there are a few things that you have to accept. It's more like when you're part of a corporate, you come, people like us probably came in at the top. You had a working team. You can go with a brand name and say, I'm recruiting, and you would get a lot of resumes, and then you would recruit. So the ticket to kind of like, as long as you do your job well, you know what the outcome is going to be. Whereas when you're an entrepreneur, you don't know what the outcome is going to be despite your best efforts. So that's something you go with your eyes wide open. Second learning for me was that before you start down to code, spend a lot of time on the strategy, which is more what product, why does that product make sense? Is that fulfilling a gap? Are there adjacencies or white spaces that you're fulfilling? And what is the roadmap? And how do you make sure that, you network, articulate, emphasize that, talk about it, and make sure that the vision is laid very clearly, because that's important when you recruit. Because recruitment, especially as an entrepreneur, is not creation of a job. It's more a responsibility. Because when you're going with a brand name and you recruit, something doesn't work, you're not putting people's careers and livelihoods at risk. Whereas as an entrepreneur, they follow your dream. You only have a vision. You have nothing to show. But you say, I have a dream like Martin Luther King, and the dream needs to resonate so much to everybody that they are willing to quit a well-paying job and say, that's my dream too. So when your dream becomes their dream, that's when the success is kind of like guaranteed. And that comes because you're recruiting intelligent people, and they're going to ask you questions. They're going to say, this is not going to work because ABC tried it and it didn't. And that may not be part of what you thought through. So the more you chip at the stone, the sculpture emerges. And it's a concentrated effort of a few. And you should never think it's my journey or my vision or it's just me. Because a bunch of people take it together and you're traveling on the road together. And the road is bound to be challenging because it's not a guaranteed success. But it's a combined effort of a few, the team that you're building, and there are going to be challenges, and you are going to kind of innovate continuously. It is going to be like Formula One racing where, you have to change the tires when the wheels are moving. So I think it's going to be something that you're responsible to investors, you're responsible to stakeholders, you're responsible to the people you recruit. And you're also responsible for ensuring that the vision is so good that you can more or less smell success. So I think it's a combination of things, and it's not an easy task, and it's not for the faint-hearted. If you kind of are reasonably sure you're on the right path, you're willing to kind of change yourself and change and chip at it to make sure that the sculpture emerges, then that's a journey for you.
Excellent, Jaya. You say it doesn't matter whether you're a man or a woman. It's a matter of, creating a compelling journey and getting everybody else also excited, right? It's not just about your excitement or your motivation. Getting everybody around you also excited in that common vision. And it also has to serve the larger purpose. You said, you talked about very powerfully saying that this is my Meri Watan, right? It's my place. And if I can make a difference, I think nothing like it. What kind of a support systems did you build, Jaya, through the way, right? All of this, if you think about it, every stakeholder, employee, customer, it takes a bit of energy from you. And it means that your personal side as well as professional side has to lay that balance. What kind of an advice do you have for women who are in the similar journey?
I think the first advice is to take your ego and toss it to the side. That is the most important personal advice I give to a younger Jaya. Because I think that once you keep your ego aside and you ask humbly for help, whether it's your investor or it is your employee or your team member who knows a lot of things more than you, and you ask for your family with folded hands and say, you know what, I'm really passionate about this. And this is why I'm doing what I'm doing. And the compelling story, not only for the outside organization, but your family too. And also talk about the impact from your kid to the adult, to the caretaker, to pretty much your parents. Everybody needs to know your story. And is that compelling enough? And let them ask questions, and with humble folded hands and tossing your ego aside, answer everybody. And that is the most important lesson I would give a younger Jaya. The minute your ego is out, you start seeing things very differently, because they all have the reason they're not supporting you If they're not, is because they don't buy your story. The reason they're not doing it is not because of their ego alone, but it's because you didn't ask humbly enough. So I think it's a combination of those things, and that's the biggest advice I would say. And prioritize and focus, because once you've brought, support is not easy. People give a lot of themselves, whether it's that employee who left a well-paying job, which guaranteed him a yearly bonus and a variable pay on a particular date, to kind of coming on your entrepreneurial journey. He believed in you. He made a sacrifice. Not only did he, his family did too, to support him. And your investors didn't know what you are. I mean, like, they know that you have a good dream. They know you have a good professional background, but they need to believe in you. Because if they don't trust you and ask so many questions when you're still not made a scalable business, I think you will go nowhere. And same thing with your parents, right? You go and tell your parents, like, you know what, I'm going to do this, and I have, a comfortable job, and I'm going to toss that aside and do that. They're going to ask you questions, and that's the question that will give you the right answers, because they care for you. And same thing, you go and tell your kid, mom is not going to be home for the next thing, or she's going to be busy with a lot of things. The kid gives up a lot too. So I think the kid needs to be invested in your dream too. So I think it's all pervasive, because support doesn't come easy, because it means giving up. Everybody's giving up a little bit of themselves too for a common cause. And the cause needs to be compelling. You need to be that focused. You need to prioritize right, and you should not take your time for granted.
True. When I was younger, I used to always say, my time I should not value by the amount of hours, but amount of, quality rather than quantity. I used to say this. I think very true, Jay. I think this resonates with a lot of people, right? In terms of ego, once you let your ego out, right? A lot of things you just say, okay, what is in it for them? What is in it for me? And then let's speak from there. And when you're speaking about perseverance, or I kind of get your perseverance, ability to stay disciplined on the course. Any stories that you want to share? I know this about you because I know you as a person. So any stories that you want to share with our listeners about staying focused and getting things?
I'll probably pick quite a few examples when I'll probably pick a couple from a professional side and from a personal side as well, to illustrate what I mean by perseverance. Because most people will say, you know what, I'm working hard enough. Isn't that perseverance? What exactly do you mean by an extra focus? Because all of us like what we're doing, and which is why we're doing what we're doing. So I think it's a little bit more than that. It means that dogged focus on, despite the hurdles that come your way. That's the difference. Because even as an entrepreneur, like I said, it's not going to be a bed of roses. It's going to not be the first guy. You will go from calling perhaps somebody that you were with a branded company, and you would give an appointment and somebody would meet you. And you would kind of go from that setting to even going to a client where they would kind of, your time would be money. And they would kind of say, when are you available? To you knocking on doors and then saying, you know what, here is a product that will help you. And they're like, come back tomorrow. Right. I mean, that's going to happen because it's more about what value you bring at that point of time. So I think it's more about, not giving up in those times and, taking it from that mindset to kind of say, I know what I'm doing is right. And when what I'm doing is right and it makes sense to a larger agenda, someday they will call me and ask me for that same appointment. And here I will go with a position of strength. So that belief is really important, and the focus to kind of keep chipping at what you're doing until the sculpture emerges that everybody looks at appreciation is what I mean by focus. Okay. So the product you do is not going to be the greatest product. It's a beta product, regardless of whoever says, I did the best. Rome was never created in a day, right? So you are going to be putting a subclass product the first time, because it's not a subclass, it's what you know best at that time, and you really think it makes sense. And as you get feedback from multiple people and your own, you continue to study until you're a guru in that field. You continue to learn every day to make that impact. You continue to learn every day so that you make more sense than everybody else in that field, which is when you are considered an expert. So expertise is not easy. Expertise means commitment in terms of learning, in terms of articulation, in terms of writing. So it's not a 9-to-5 job. So that is what I mean by perseverance. I said something, I created a product, nobody's listening. They don't have to listen to you unless you make more sense than everybody else and you are bang on in terms of your competence. So I think that building that competence is what I mean by focus.
And that also builds on you, right? You also have to keep that belief in yourself, right? When you get in the face of failure, not see failure is a probably a big term. Let's say an appointment didn't go well, which is about to happen, right? Yeah, you are actually.
It's a lot more than that. Even for instance, the last time you brought coffee, or the last time you kind of were the errand boy, the last time you kind of like looked up to people and learned in most people's journey would have been when you were an intern out of college. But the same, you become an intern when you're an entrepreneur, because I probably won't know the latest AI algorithms, but the kid out of the block today coming from school will. So I'm not going to go to him. He's not going to come up to me and say, here's what's happening, Jaya. I need to sit next to that kid and learn and figure out what he's doing and say, you know what, I want this. How would you make that happen? Can you teach me things I don't know? And that's when learning happens much more easier. So I think it's more about treating yourself as an intern every day and learning new things. And I think that is when you learn the most. And that's a very humbling experience as I go back to it. And those are things I mean by perseverance. And you are a runner too. So I think we share that. It's easier to, in a lot of ways, sprints are easier, but marathon running is harder. And as co-runners, we know that too, because you're not competing against anybody. You're competing against yourself. You are always doing that because it's a mind game. After a certain period, you just feel the rhythm of your feet and the sound. Everything else is blanked out. So you are in that state of nirvana where you're running completely and all you do is you want to get to the finish line. So I think that finish line is a metaphor, because that is something we need to test ourselves continuously and getting out of your comfort zone, learning new things, letting go of the ego. And that's when you're continuously living. And that's just been the philosophy of how I look at it. And I think that's what I mean by perseverance.
Excellent, Jaya. I'm going to steal your word term, be an intern daily. I think you were rightly put. My biggest learnings have always been when I said, you know what, I'm starting at the start point. I've done this so many times in my career. Right? You've got to do it because whatever we started right at the beginning of the game, it's no longer the same. You don't use a DOS system, neither do you use a. So you've got to do that, right? And sometimes there's this often said that, 10 years back we were able to do this. And I'm like, come on, that's not how things work, right?
It's more time, and that's when the learning happens. In fact, I sit with a bunch of college kids, and then that was when I learned a lot more about Web 3.0, metaverse, what sells, what is financial services. So unless you go through the journey with the 20s, to people in their 18, 19, 20, you're not going to really appreciate the world the way they look at it, because it needs to make sense not for you, it needs to make sense for them. And that's when you're looking at the next generation. Building products to last does not mean what makes sense for you, it means what makes sense for that kid out of college.
True. I actually recently learned and made myself learn DeFi, the decentralized finance, right? And then only realized that, oh my God, I don't know so much in finance. So it just gets started, right? You have that humbling experience saying that, okay, you don't know much. That's a great starting point where, glass is no longer full. So you get started. Thank you, Jay. I think that's a great answer to the perseverance, discipline, and focus question. I know we have been talking for about 30 minutes. I want you to share some thoughts. What will software look like, let's say 5 years time? or maybe a 10-year horizon, if you have thought of, what would it impact as people who are there here, right? Because initially we were trying to develop software to do basic things. And then we went to the next version of, everything in software, everything has a front face. And now, and not only that, we are getting into predictiveness.
I'm going to give you a very controversial answer, which is all predictions are going to fail. Because no one in the history has predicted that where technology is going to be today, and the fact that AI will look at and quantum computing coming our way is going to completely toss that on its heel and throw it all away, and we're going to be looking at something different. So the first thing I would say is don't predict, just adapt, because I think predictions are going to fail. And the only thing that's going to be true is your ability to adapt as quickly as possible. Because all of this is going to have a horizon which is coming very shortly. And we all, just think about it. Actually, we all said ones and zeros where the world of technology. There's nothing more. It was black or white. And quantum turned on the seals and said it's not 1 or 0. You don't know what it is. And that is the basis of the entire revolution. So now the world is, don't predict, because predictions are going to fail. So that is my number one prediction.
This is the first time. I think our podcast has been running for 160 odd episodes. This is the first time someone has told this, Jaya. Don't predict, adapt. Great, Jaya. Words of advice you want to give, apart from not letting your ego take you for a ride, right? Any other thoughts or from your own learnings and decisions that you made? Any thoughts you want to share?
So when the going gets tough, the tough get going. And I think it's more in terms of there are going to be challenges, professional and personal. It's harder for a woman than it's for a man. Because you kind of like do the juggling act, you do a lot of balancing, and that's not changed in at least our generation. So I think it's going to be harder, but just don't give up because it's harder. Because you not only are setting up the benchmark for yourself, but you're also setting up the benchmark for the next generation. So I think when the going gets tough, which is what I tell most people, keep persevering at it, because someday the road is just going to get easier. And, I'm going to give the example, as you're a fellow runner, how hard was it to run your first 500 meters? It was very, very hard. We were out of breath. We were kind of like thinking, oh my God, when is this going to end? It was misery. And each one, and the adage that we say, right? Don't add more than X miles per day, because it's going to be 20% more than what you did yesterday. And that's all you can max do. At best, just add it incrementally. So it is going to be tough, but then don't give up, because those baby steps do matter a lot in that long journey that's life. And it's more about how you look back at the end of the journey and have that smile on your face. And the smile comes when it was not easy. The smile comes when there were roadblocks, and how you overcame, you went through that, you overcame that, and you had a lesson to learn, and how that lesson helped you. So I would want to end it by saying, I've always said perseverance is important, but I think that focus, perseverance, and not giving up when the going gets tough is the really most important lesson of my life. And I did learn it from people that were role models to me. Most important, influencer in my life was my mom. When the going gets tough, it's more about how you leave an impact, right? And the impact should be felt long after you're gone. And that's when you made a mark in the world.
Fantastic, Jaya. What a great Women's Day message. Thank you so much for your time. And I love your journey, and I love this talking to you even more. I hope you will come again sometime to talk about more detail about what BCT DIgital is sharing and doing in the future. All the very best, and happy Women's Day.
Thank you. Always a pleasure talking to you.
We thank Siddharth for the music and Anita for promoting the Software People stories.
If you like this episode,
Please subscribe on your favorite podcast client.
And spread the word in your network.
If you'd like to share your story,
Contact us at podcasts@pm-powerconsulting.com.